Hey, this is Sherry Fowler, and I am going over a model essay talking about the different components of it and how to put your essay in the right format. So first of all, let's look at the title page. Let's look at the characteristics. Now, it should be typed in. I hand wrote this since it was from a handbook, but the last name and page number with a space between right here should go right here. And then the student's name, the teacher's name here, the title, not title, but the name of the assignment. It could be the title here, but usually it's the name of the assignment, the class, this is sophomore English 1, and then the date in MLA format. 15 January 2008 was this one. Notice there's no commas. Then you come down and center the title. No extra spaces. The whole thing should just be double spaced. So center the title. To do so, you want to click here. This centers, but you don't want to center the essay. So once you come down here, you left justify again. Now let's check our margins. Margins should be 1 inch, and the way you check that is you go up to page layout margins, and you should click here normal 1 inch. And these are correct. Okay, let's talk about the characteristics of an introduction. An introduction begins with general information, typically about the time period, the subject matter the essay will be dealing with, the piece of literature, the background of the piece of literature it will be dealing with, and then leads up to the most specific part, which is the thesis. The thesis shows the organization of the essay and the specific ideas that will be discussed in the essay. This is on the Epic of Gilgamesh, so it starts out with background information about the overall purpose of the piece, and then it leads up to the most specific part, which is the thesis. Somewhere in the midst of Gilgamesh's travels, he learns 3 lessons: the folly of arrogance, the responsibility of power, and the acceptance of one's own mortality. Now this should, I don't know why that moved for some reason. Okay, get them back in the right place. Trying to. Okay, our 3 parts. The folly of arrogance is our first idea, the responsibility of power is the second, and the acceptance of one's own mortality. The paragraphs should also come in this order. Whatever order you establish will be the order of the essay. Okay, we begin our first paragraph with a transition. First of all, that works great. Lets the reader know where they are in the essay. Gilgamesh is 2/3 God and 1/3 man, and it is this combination that leads to his arrogance. So it mentions the thesis point, which is arrogance. Always your topic sentence in some way should mention the thesis point. It can say it in a different way, but it still needs to be that idea. And it talks about it a little bit before we lead up to our first quote, which is here. Now always introduce the quotes. This is a primary quote. When I say primary, I mean from the piece of literature that we're writing about. When Enkidu expresses his fear of the monster Humbaba, Gilgamesh simply responds. So this writer uses a sentence to lead up to the quote, and then she gives the quote, and then the citation goes here. Now 16 is the page number. Notice there's no word page, no little PG, nothing, just the number 16, and that tells me that's the page number. Notice there's no punctuation here, just a period here. That's very important. I mark that on essays all the time where students don't do that correctly. The period goes here. Okay, and let's come down. Here is another quote, which comes from that same page, which she introduces this in a shorter way. He pleads. Okay, and then we have a secondary. I don't know why this highlighting got moved around. This is the part I need to move because this is where she begins the secondary. Jacobson is a critic or someone else who is making a comment about the piece of literature. You have to introduce those also. So Jacobson, that's the last name. Never use the first name of authors. You don't know them personally. Use their last name or their full name. Jacobson explains. That's how she introduces it, and then she goes into the citation. Now at the end, notice here, there's no page number or anything. That tells us that it comes from a website or some web source. If it were from a print source, you'd have a page number here. But since she introduced it with the name here, all she needs to do is a period and close her quotation marks. Notice the period goes inside the quotation marks. Again, that is an error I mark over and over and over again. Now, she had introduced this in a general way, like one critic states. Then in parentheses here, she would need to put Jacobson. And let's change that just to show you what it'll look like. And then here, instead of a period, we would have a parentheses. And then the period would go there. That is the difference. And we would still bold that because it's still part of the citation. So either way works. Either introduce it with the critic's name here and then nothing here, or introduce it in a very general way here and put the name here. Now, for example, this could have been an article without an author. If it is, you do the same thing except you use the title. If it were just a title, she'd say an article entitled and then tell me the title, and then she would need nothing here. Or she would say one article states and then put the title in quote marks within the parentheses. And then follow it with 2 of your own sentences. She only has 1 sentence at the end, but I'm asking all students now to have 2 sentences at the end of each quote. So it's a quote sandwich. You introduce the quote, you give the quote, and then you discuss the quote with 2 of your own sentences. And let's look at some other examples of where she does this. She goes into her next thesis point. She has other primary quotes. This is one that comes from the book, from the primary source. There's another one from the primary source. They're all introduced, and they should all be discussed. And remember, 2 of your own sentences after. Introduce it first, give the quote, and then 2 of your own sentences after. Here's another secondary source by someone by the last name of A. Bush. And she does the same thing. She quotes it, and then we don't need anything here because she introduced it with the author's last name. Okay, let's see what else we can find. Okay, more primary quotes. Again, she needed some more discussion after each of them. More quotes. All your quotes should be short. There's a way to do a block quote, but really you don't need a lot of block quotes in such a short essay. 2 or 3 sentences max will be what you're looking for in a quote. If you do have a block quote, it has to be indented 10 spaces from the left, which would be here, and there's special formatting for that, which you can look up in the packet. But again, you're really not going to need long quotes, just short quotes to talk about what you're talking about to support your own position. Now that she's talked about everything, she's ready to close. Here is the transition she uses for her conclusion. With all considered, that works fine. In conclusion, anything to let the reader know this is the concluding paragraph. A conclusion should be about the same length as an introduction, about 1/3 of a page. It should restate the main ideas of the paper and leave the reader with something to think about regarding the topic, sometimes relating it to contemporary times or relating it to a similar idea is a good way to go. But this is your time to be profound, to give your reader something to think about beyond what has been written in the paper. Okay, and then she will have, her next page will be her works cited. Now the works cited should not be a separate document. It should be the same document as the essay. In order to do a works cited, you need to do a page break. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that. To do a page break, you go to the end of everything you've typed, enter once, and then go up to Insert, Page Break. And it opens a blank page. Now we already have a works cited where she's done that, so we don't have to do that, so we'll just erase that and look at her works cited page. Now again, if this were part of the document, you'd have the last name and page number on all of these. I'm looking at this within a handbook, that's the reason it's not there. but Rossetti, and then the page number would be here. Notice that the characteristics of the works cited, it's double spaced, it just says works cited, it doesn't say page or anything like that, and everything is alphabetized. You ignore articles when you're alphabetizing, like prepositions or a and the, and you just go into the first main letter of the title. Here it would be an E, because from is a preposition and the is an article. This is one of our secondary sources, so we have the first name here and the last name here. Always invert. Last name first, first name last. Then we have the title of the essay she used in quote marks. Then we have the original source here. Actually, the original source is just this part. Okay, this is the database that she got it from. The word web tells me it came from the internet, and then the date in the MLA format, 13 January 2008. This is the shortcut for citing a bunch of different works from a textbook. Really, she could have done this by just putting one entry, and there it shows you in the packet, I believe at the top of page 9, how to do it with just one entry, but she used the shortcut, which means you cite the whole textbook. This is her whole textbook. It's the sophomore textbook, and this is one entry from it. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't have an author, so it starts with the title. The translator, you never cite the translator as the author, though. The translator always comes after the work. Then Kinsella tells me if I want the full reference to go look in this book. So it lists this, so I know to look in this. And then the page numbers of the story and the word print that tells me it was from a print source. Then this again, this is one of the authors of the book. Et al. Is a Latin phrase that means and everybody else, because there's a bunch of different authors for this book. This is the name of the textbook, the full name. This is the city it was published in, Upper Saddle River. Never the state, just the city. Pearson Press Hall, this is the publishing company. This is the year it was published. And print means it's actually a book source rather than an online source. And then this one's the same as the first one we looked at. It has the author, last name first, first name last. The title, note it is in quote marks. The whole title, even if it's long, is in quote marks. Then the original source, which is all of this. And it'll usually say source when you're looking at it, so that everything that goes after it, and it's different information on each source. The database that she used, which was the Student Resource Center, the word web, and then the date she got it off the internet in MLA format. Okay, well that's the parts of an essay. Go forth and write a wonderful, well-formatted essay. Thank you.